without the labor of the people. And there is no economy without nature and its ecological services. These are the social and ecological boundaries limit any economic model or policies are bound to stay within. COVID-19 and the climate crisis paradoxically reminded the whole humanity these two obvious facts. I wish to thank all honourable members for their attention and patience. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I did not want to interrupt you in the speech, but I am the Deputy Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Honourable Mr. Otim.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. First of all, let me thank the Honourable Leader of the Opposition and my colleague, Honourable Ashok Subron, for intervening on this bill. I don't have much, yes, I'm congratulating for his speech, for his maiden speech. I don't have much to add by way of summing up, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, because there is clearly consensus on this bill to rectify a decision taken by the former government which was tainted with illegality. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition seemed to suggest that with the coming into force of this bill, the Honourable Minister of Labour will no longer have the power to refer matter to NRB for advice, especially as regard those employees which are not covered by remuneration regulation. This is not correct. What we're doing is we are giving a special power to the minister to come by way of regulation to regulate any sectors, occupation, industry not covered by the remuneration regulations. But we're not doing away with Section 91 of the Employment Regulation Act, which allows the minister to refer to the NRB any issue for their consideration. And in fact, I can tell you that the former, my predecessor had already on the 3rd of September referred to the National Remuneration Board. They made a reference for the preparation of regulations concerning employees not covered by the existing 32 remuneration orders. We will wait to see those recommendations before we come up with the regulation to enable all employees which are not covered in the remuneration regulations to be able to get this additional salary with retrospective effect. The Honourable Leader of Opposition also spoke about indexation of the salary compensation. This is something that our government will look into. We have received representation from trade union to that effect. We will have a committee, a technical committee, which will look at this because there are also representation by some trade unions who think that if you index the salary compensation automatically on the inflation rate, they may not get sufficient compensation. So it's a tricky situation, but we are open to suggestion. The minimum wage of 610 rupees is in addition to the basic salary, which all workers earning less than 50,000 rupees earn in Mauritius in the private sector. So with these words, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I commend once more this bill to the House. Thank you.
Seconded. Seconded. Motion needs to be seconded. Thank you. The question is that the Employment Relations Amendment Bill, number 19 of 2024, be read the second time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Public Bills Committee stage.
Clause 1, short title. Clause 2, interpretation. Clause 3, Section 94, Principle Act amended. Clause 4, 8th Schedule added to Principal Act. Clause 5, Commencement.
The question is that clauses 1 to 5 stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Title and enacting clause.
The question is that the title and enacting clause stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that I do report to the House that the Employment Relations Amendment Bill number 19 of 2024 has passed the committee stage without amendment. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Thank you. Be seated. Honorable members, I have to report to the House that the Employment Relations Amendment Bill number 19 of 2024 has passed the committee stage without amendment.
Public Bills, third reading.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I move that the Employment Relations Amendment Bill number 19 of 2024 be read a third time and passed.
Seconded. The motion needs to be seconded. Thank you. Thank you. The question is that the Employment Relations Amendment Bill number 19 of 2024 be read the same time, third time and passed. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Public Bills, second reading.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I move that the Special Allowance Bill number 20 of 2024 be read a second time.
Seconded. Thank you.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I am pleased to present this historical bill to the House. Historical because no government before has legislated for the provision of a special allowance for employees drawing a monthly salary, basic salary not exceeding 50,000 rupees. I say no government before. Even last year, in November, when there was a formal request from the opposition for the payment of a 14th-month bonus in December 2023 to all employees of the private and public sectors earning less than 50,000 rupees, the then government refused to do so. Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, sir, the population has been suffering from the disastrous economic policy of the MSM government with its deliberate policy to depreciate our rupee. Between December 2014 and November 2024, our rupee has depreciated by around 46% relative to the US dollar. This has resulted in a steady increase in price of goods and services, eroding the purchasing power of our population. The increase in the price of essential commodities, foodstuff, medicine, has particularly affected the working class and the pensioners. As a caring government, we had to do the maximum that we could to alleviate the suffering of the population. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, before we can give, we need to ascertain how much we have. We have to act responsibly, because if we don't have the money, then we will have to borrow. And if we borrow, we must have the ability to repay, or else we would be burdening our children and grandchildren. This is why the first thing that the Honourable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance did was to assess the status of the economy. And last Tuesday, he made a statement to this House with regard to the state of the economy, and he tabled a copy of the document. We were all stunned, appalled, shocked, and angry. We knew that the figures published by the former government were unreliable, and we had said so in this House and outside. But we never expected the magnitude of the economic mess in which the MSM government has left us. L'ancien ministre des Finances parlait de boom économique, mais c'est plutôt une bombe économique qui nous l'a légué. I will just give you one example, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, and it relates directly to the workers of this country. Contribution sociale généralisée. Honourable members who were here would recall that the then Minister of Finance abolished contribution which used to be made to the National Pension Fund and instead compel workers and employers to contribute up to 9% of the salaries of workers to a fund called Contribution Sociale Généralisée. We were told at that time, and I remember very well, the Honourable Minister of Finance saying that this contribution to CSG was meant to pay the pension of workers when they retire. And he told the House and the population at large that what he was proposing was better than the National Pension Fund, which enabled people from the private sector at the age of 65 to benefit from an additional pension. Contribution sociale généralisée is nothing more than sweat, a tax on the sweat of labor, which is supposed to finance the retirement. However, when we look at the document, the State of the Economy, that was tabled last week, for the financial year 2024-2025, the state is expecting to collect 12.9 billion rupees through contribution sociale généralisée. 12.9 billion rupees, that's a lot of money taken from the salary of workers of this country. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, do you know out of this 12.9 billion rupees, how much the MSN government has earmarked to spend from that fund? Out of 12.9 billion rupees, they had earmarked spending of 21.8 billion rupees. Not only have they completely wiped out all the contributions sociales généralisées which were supposed to pay for the retirement, for the pension of workers, but now we also have to provide the finance for up to 9 billion rupees because of the reckless decision of the former Minister of Finance and the former MSM government. Under the former Prime Minister, Pravin Jagnnath. Irresponsable, irresponsable. Et comme l'a si bien dit le député Prime Minister, c'est un crime économique envers les Mauriciens, envers les enfants de notre pays. Our public sector debt has reached almost 560 billion rupees, representing 83.4% of GDP. 83.4% of GDP, when according to law, our public sector debt should not exceed 80% of GDP. And by comparison, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, when the MSM government took office in December 2014, our public sector debt at that time was only 237 billion rupees, representing slightly less than 60% of GDP. They have more than double our debt. The population needed the truth, and the Prime Minister took the bold decision of telling the whole population what is the reality of the economic situation in Mauritius. But now that the truth is out, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, what would international rating agencies do? Now that they know that the former government has been manipulating figures, overstating growth, understating debt, understating budget deficit, what would the international rating community do? And Moody's was quick to react. Yesterday, Moody's published a communiqué under the heading Government of Mauritius, Discrepancies in Economic Data Will Challenge Fiscal Consolidation Efforts. While congratulating our Prime Minister, Honorable Navin Ramgoolam, for government's commitment to transparency and fiscal reforms, Moody's expressed concern about the current state of the economy. And Moody's stated something which is of great concern to us. Moody's said, and I quote, "The audit's finding will slow the pace of fiscal consolidation, leaving Mauritius' debt burden and debt affordability matrix weaker than other B2A3 rated peers." In uncoded terms, Moody's is warning us. Moody's is warning us. It's telling us that based on the new data that we have been providing them, we rate our economic situation is worse than other countries which find themselves in the same rating band as ours, Baa3. And as expected, Moody's ended by telling us that we need to implement reform aimed at debt reduction. And I have to add, Moody's statement came before the bill was presented to this House. So Moody's is not aware of what we intend to do in terms of the payment of a special allowance. So we're going to face a tough time convincing Moody's not to downgrade us, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. And we're already at the last threshold of investment grade. If we are downgraded by Moody's, we will become junk status. And if we become junk status, it will be very difficult for Mauritius to raise finance on the international market. And even if we are able to raise finance in the international market, it would be at a premium, at a higher interest rate. And downgrading the Mauritius to junk status will have a direct impact on our bank, on our banking system, and on the image of Mauritius as a serious financial center. So, and we should not, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, take the threat of downgrading or being downgraded lightly. Just a few days ago, Moody's downgraded France rating just hours after President Macron appointed his new Prime Minister, Mr. François Bayrou. So it is against this backdrop, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, that we are bringing this bill before the House. And this special allowance that we are proposing through this bill, the payment of this special allowance, is part of a larger package which government is introducing. For this bill, we are providing for the payment of 1 month's basic salary to 420,200 employees from both the private and public sector, representing some 90% of total employees in this country. So after passing of this bill, 90% of workers of this country would be getting an additional month of basic salary. The second measure that we are introducing as part of the package is to give 1 month's allowance to every pensioners, our senior citizens, widows, orphans, disabled persons. They will also get an additional 1,000 rupees as from January next year. This alone, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, will represent a funding of more than 5 billion rupees from the state. The third measure that we are proposing is to grant a salary compensation of 610 rupees per month for all workers whose basic salary is less than 50,000 rupees. We decided to give this salary compensation, which represents the inflation rate, official inflation rate multiplied by the minimum wage. We decided to give this despite representation to the contrary by the business community, and in particular Business Mauritius. The fourth measure in this package is to reduce the price of petroleum products by 5 rupees per litre. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, this is just the beginning. We will do more as we implement our structural changes, as we install fiscal discipline, as we cut down wastage of public funds, and as we boost our economy. With your permission, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I will now talk about the salient features of this bill. Clause 2 of the bill defines basic wage or salary and specifies that the basic wage and salary include additional remuneration payable for the year 2024 and the wage relativity adjustment payable as from the 1st July 2024. This is why it was very important that we pass the first bill, which we have just done, amending the Employers' Relations Act to provide for the payment of this additional salary compensation with effect from 1st of July 2024. So now the basic salary will include also that adjustment to the basic salary. The definition of employee is in line with the general definition of worker under the Workers' Rights Act and includes part-time employees. Now you will note from the definition of section that employee does not include a public officer, a local government officer, an employee of a statutory body who is or has opted to be governed by the terms and conditions of the Pay Research Bureau. Now, this provision of the bill has caused a lot of confusion, and I'm very disappointed, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, when I see trade unionists of great experience, having worked in the civil service, who has full knowledge of how things are done in the government sector, come and do a press conference and spread lies about this government not going to pay the special allowance to all the public officers of this country. This is not the case. The government has taken a commitment and will abide by its commitment to pay a basic 1 month's salary to all public officers in government service, in municipal council, in parastatal bodies who earn less than 50,000 rupees, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. The reason why it is not in the bill is because this bill concerns employees of the private sector. With regards to employees in government and those governed by the PRB, it is done any additional salary, and it is done every year when we have to increase the salary compensation. It is done by way of a circular issued by the Financial Secretary, by the Ministry of Finance, addressed to the head of departments, the supervisory officers of each ministries and departments. And those supervisory officers then in turn informs all the municipal council, the local authorities, the parastatal bodies, the other public bodies which falls under their responsibility and direct them to effect the payment of compensation. And this time also, this is the same methodology that is going to be applied, so we don't need any amendment to the law to provide for the payment of special allowance to public officers. Just like we don't need any amendment to the law to pay the pension to the senior citizen, to the orphan, widows, and disabled person. This has already been taken care of by the Honourable Minister of Social Security, and understand that they are going to be paid before year end. They've started to be paid as from this week in the post office and in banks. So even before the passing of this bill, pensioners are being paid their additional 1 month's pension. Clause 3 of the bill provides the eligibility criteria for employees to be entitled to the special allowance. Provision is made for the payment of special allowance to employees who have been in employment for the whole or part of the year. Subsection 3 sets out the different circumstances where an employee having worked for part of the year will be entitled to special allowance. And subsection 4 clarifies that where an employee has been in the employment of more than one employer, then each employer will pay his pro rata share of the special allowance. Subsection 5 provides for the payment of special allowance in 2 installments. The first installment must be paid on or before the 31st of December of this year, before year end. The second installment must be paid before the end of January. Now, why 2 installments? Simply because we have received representation from the workers, from the trade unionists, who told us to make the payment in 2 installments because they want to have cash in January to pay for school materials and school uniform. That is why we're not paying all the special allowance in one go in December. Provision is also made in this bill where the employer and the employee so agree for the payment to be made in up to 4 equal installments. But it's strictly where the employer and the employees agree. If there is no agreement, then the default rule is still payment has to be made half before year end and half by 31st of January. And subsection 6 clarifies that the special allowance that is being paid is on top of all bonuses that the employee may have been entitled, whether under collective agreement, under contract with his employer. You know, some people receive a bonus for attendance. This special allowance is on top of that. Even where a private company is able to pay more than 13th months of salary, this special allowance will be payable on top of that bonus otherwise payable to the employee. Clause 4 of the bill empowers an authorized officer to enter any work premises, inspect books and records, and requests the employer to furnish such information as the authorized officer requires for the purpose of complying with the bill. Clause 6 of the bill make it an offense for any person to contravene the bill or obstruct an authorized officer in the exercise of his power, punishable by a fine not exceeding 5,000 rupees on conviction. And I need to point out 5,000 rupees is per employee. I will be moving, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, to amendment at committee stage to clause 8 of the bill, which will be circulated shortly because we've been working closely with the State Law Office and the Mauritius Revenue Authorities. Essentially, clause 8 of the bill deals with the criteria for certain enterprises, special and medium enterprises, and other enterprises that may be prescribed by regulation to get financial assistance from government. We do recognize, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, that it will not be easy for all enterprise, especially in the export processing sector and the small enterprises, to absorb the full amount of the special allowance, the payment of the 13 months basic salary that is proposed as special allowance. This is why we have come up with a mechanism whereby those eligible employers, they will have to pay the salary of the employees at half of it by year end, the other half in January, and then they can claim the money back from the Director General of the MRA if they satisfy the criteria set out in the bill. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, we wish that we could have done more, but our hands were tied because of the disastrous state of the economy which we have inherited. But I am making a solemn appeal to all enterprises in the private sector who have the means to pay the special allowance to also pay that allowance to all workers of their enterprise, including those who earn a basic salary exceeding 50,000 rupees. With these words, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I commend the bill to the House.
Thank you. The Speaker will resume the seat.
Thank you. Please be seated. Yes, Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, toute la République est concernée par le Special Allowance Bill, un projet de loi qui concerne la classe travailleuse, mais aussi le patronat, et je suis sûr qu'ils nous suivent avec beaucoup d'attention. Madame la Présidente, ce projet de loi découle d'une promesse électorale annoncée dans un premier temps par l'Alliance Les PEP et par la suite l'Alliance du changement. Il y a unanimité sur le fait que les travailleurs obtiendront un boni de 14e mois grâce à l'ancien Premier ministre. Parce que c'est lui qui a annoncé ça en premier. Mais malheureusement, ce gouvernement a décidé que seulement une partie des employés vont obtenir ce boni de 14e mois. Permettez-moi de faire la chronologie des annonces, parce que c'est important pour comprendre là où nous en sommes aujourd'hui. Je l'ai dit, le leader de l'Alliance, les PEP, Pravin Jagnat, avait fait cette annonce lors d'un rassemblement à Phoenix le 3 novembre, et par la suite, les dirigeants de l'Alliance du changement lui ont emboîté le pas lors d'une conférence de presse quelques jours plus tard, et l'actuel Premier ministre avait confirmé cette promesse lors d'une émission sur une radio. Pour en revenir à ce que le ministre avait dit un peu plus tôt, et la remarque que j'ai eus, il faut aussi souligner que c'est en novembre 2023 que le leader de l'opposition d'alors avait évoqué cette proposition et à travers un private notice questions, ce à quoi le ministre d'alors avait répondu qu'il faudra faire des consultations avant de prendre une telle décision, Madame la Présidente. Un an après cette PNQ et un mois après les élections générales, soit maintenant, le gouvernement vient de l'avant devant cette auguste assemblée pour l'introduction d'un paiement d'un boni de 14e mois, mais seulement pour les employés touchant un salaire moins de 50 000 roupies. C'est la première trahison de ce gouvernement envers son électorat et envers la population. Je dirais une première étape de serre-ceinture pour la population. Un gouvernement qui montre déjà, malheureusement, qui se soumet au diktat du gros capital. Au fait, si j'évoque cela, Madame la Présidente, c'est suite aux déclarations de l'honorable Deputy Prime Minister lors d'une conférence de presse samedi, je pense, où il a évoqué que le gouvernement avait subi des fortes pressions pour fixer le seuil salarial à 30 000 roupies. Est-ce que ce gouvernement a cédé aux pressions du patronat pour ne pas payer ceux touchant des salaires de moins que 50 000 roupies? Madame la Présidente, une des raisons de ce vote massif lors des dernières élections en faveur de l'Alliance du changement était évidemment la promesse de ce boni de 14e mois. Un vote qui comporte sûrement ceux ayant un salaire plus de 50 000 roupies.
Honorable members, he has the floor. 1 minute. He has the floor. Let's respect, please. Remember, rights, respect, responsibility. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madame Speaker. Et c'est pourquoi, Madame la Présidente, j'ai élaboré la chronologie des événements avant les élections, parce que sans cette promesse, je le dis, les résultats auraient pu être autrement. What was clear, Madam Speaker, to both? What was clear, Madam Speaker, to both the outgoing government and the incoming one, as well as the PEP at Birab, was that the 14-month bonus pledge, far from being a political gimmick or a hot air promise, had become a critical vote winner and a necessity in the minds of voters to alleviate the cost of living crisis and restore some of their purchasing power before the end of this year. It was seen, Madam Speaker, by both alliances as vital to restore a feel-good factor among the Mauritian people before the start of the new year. The outgoing government made it clear that they had the capacity to pay and to honor that pledge. That's where comes the motto, parole donnée, parole sacrée. Similarly, the actual Prime Minister, Dr. Navin Ramgoolam, in a press conference on November 5th, as the leader of the Alliance, the leader of Alliance du Changement, made the following statement, and I quote, nous garde nos paroles, ce qui nous peut dire, nous peut faire. L'Alliance du changement prend l'engagement que le paiement du 14e mois sera bel et bien effectué en cas de victoire. Now, Madam Speaker, government has changed its tune, saying only those earning less than 50,000 rupees will receive a 14-month bonus. Pour moi, c'est une promesse à demi tenue, Madame la Présidente. Madam Speaker, I cannot hear such words in this House, Madam Speaker. May I ask that these words be withdrawn?
I don't think we should make remarks on an honourable member. Be very careful on comments, please. Be very careful. Please carry on, Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam
But
Speaker.
also, don't invite.
I'm not inviting, Madam Speaker.
Well-
I'm stating facts. Let them have their way when they will take the floor. I will sit down and listen to what they have to say. Le débat que nous tenons aujourd'hui, Madame la Présidente, doit prendre en considération la publication d'un rapport sur l'état de l'économie, selon la version du gouvernement actuel. And I'll get back to the report on the state of the economy later. Now, the new government has been saying in their defense, Madam Speaker, that they did not know that the outgoing government had left the country in such an economic mess, thereby impairing their ability to honor the 14-month pledge. Now, let me remind the House, Madam Speaker, when as late as June 2024, Mr. Ramasitanen, the new governor of the Bank of Mauritius, stated the following about the state of the Mauritian economy in an interview he had given in Mauritius Times. And I quote, "The economy is already in dire straits if we consider the true figures of GDP, budget deficit, public debt, export of services and foreign exchange reserves, and the money illusion effect. These key macro indicators are being cynically doctored to hide the reality." End of quote. Now, if he is to be believed, one can only assume, Madam Speaker, that the leaders of Alliance du Changement were being reckless in making that promise to pay the 14-month bonus in full knowledge of their capacity to pay, thus prepared to sacrificing the trust of voters at the altar of political expediency, Madam Speaker. Indeed, I know many, if not all of them on the other side of the House, will revere on the resounding victory of the Alliance during the recent general elections. We have to accept the decision of the population as we have in the past. People voted for a change, and so be it. After 1 month, I'm much tempted to ask, where is the change? But I will come to that much later, Madam Speaker. Madame la Présidente, la chronologie des événements. À la suite des élections générales, démontre clairement que le gouvernement préparait l'opinion publique sur la révision de leurs promesses électorales. La présentation du rapport sur l'état de l'économie va dans ce sens. Et, comme je l'ai dit un peu plus tôt, le projet de loi qui est présenté à cette Chambre aujourd'hui est étroitement lié à the State of the Economy Report. Maintenant, laissez-moi venir sur le projet de loi et permettez-moi de soulever certaines sections de ce projet de loi que je qualifierais d'injustes. La première, Madame la Présidente, c'est le non-paiement aux travailleurs bénéficiant plus de 50 000 roupies. Sur ce point, la population, je pense, attend par exemple des explications de l'honorable Soubron, qui est syndicaliste et qui je pense, doit venir expliquer, Madame la Présidente. Et le fait de pénaliser une catégorie des travailleurs de ce pays, le gouvernement débute son règne en créant une frustration parmi son électorat, mais aussi parmi la population, Madame la Présidente. Let me get to clause 3, subsection 5A of the bill, where it is stipulated that every employer shall pay the special allowance in 2 equal installments, where 1, the first installment is paid not later than on the last working day of December 2024, and 2, the last installment is paid on the last working day of January 2025. Madam Speaker, it is all too clear that the above proposed provision is a mandatory section imposing a positive duty on every employer to pay the special allowance in 2 equal installments. It is our firm contention that the employer should instead have had an obligation imposed on him to pay the special allowance in 1 full and final installment in December, and that well before the last working day, so as not to defeat its purpose. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, that same clause, that is clause 3, subsection 5A, leaves no doubt that it is to read subject to clause 3, subsection 5B. And now, if I may, it is both my firm and reasoned opinion that subsection 5B is loosely drafted, and this may possibly create some practical difficulties or confusions, and more importantly, Madam Speaker, open floodgates for potential abuse by unscrupulous employers. And I say so for the following reasons, and I'll explain. First, by allowing an employer and an employee to agree on the payment of a special allowance in not more than 4 equal installments on the condition that such a payment starts on the last working day of December 2024, and the remaining installments are paid on such dates as they may agree. Madam Speaker, therefore, on a literal interpretation of this first part of the clause, an employer and an employee may agree to straddle the payment across 4 equal installments, and there is no mention of a specific time frame within which the 4 installments should be paid. I am of the view, Madam Speaker, that there are not sufficient safeguards in the present bill to ensure that any agreement reached under this section is through a transparent and documented process and done in a fair and honest manner to effect effectively rule out any real possibility of undue influence, intimidation, threats, or any form of coercion in the mind of the worker to secure such an agreement. This is why I believe that in its current form, this section does not provide adequate guarantees to the working class and is dangerous in the hands of some inconsiderate employers. Now, these two distinct rules will also create two categories of workers. One who gets paid in 2 installments and by not later than the end of January 2025, and others who, because of an agreement which has been reached, payment will be made in 4 equal installments without a specific time frame. And that, as highlighted, in situations where there will be no proper supervision or adequate control by the state. Now, I also, the Honorable Minister mentioned that. I also wish to add that there is no offense specified under Clause 6 in relation to acts and doings or omissions on the part of an employer who may fraudulently, intentionally, negligently, recklessly, or carelessly mislead the employee into an agreement under Clause 3, subsection 5b, and therefore justifying the apprehension which an employee may have. Anyway, at any rate, the penalty imposed should a person be found to have committed an offense under the Act shall on conviction be liable to a fine not exceeding only 5,000 rupees, which is relatively, Madam Speaker, a weak penalty and unlikely to have a meaningful punitive effect to force compliance. Now, the last part of Clause 3, subsection 5b is to the effect that where there is no agreement, payment will be effected at the end of each successive month following the month of December. Madam Speaker, this part is most vague and imprecise, and one is left wondering whether there is any legal need to have this part. For if there is no agreement, then it means technically that the provision of Clause 3, subsection 5a should prevail. Clause 3, subsection 5a, which specifies the time period to pay in 2 installments, not later than the last working day of January, cannot be made subject to this limb of Clause 3, subsection 5b, where there is no agreement and no clarity so as to by when the payment should be completed. Having this second part in the bill, Madam Speaker, cannot be reconciled with Clause 3, subsection 5a, which becomes of no purpose, and in the light of the foregoing arguments, I propose that this be removed completely to avoid any confusion, that is, where no agreement is reached, as it is not in order, Madam Speaker. Now, let me comment on the report of the state of the economy, which has been widely commented upon since it has been tabled in this House. But before, I would like to refer the House to the IMF report where it is stated, and I quote, the 2024 Article 4 consultation discusses that Mauritius has rebounded strongly from the pandemic on the back of a buoyant tourism, social housing construction, and financial services. The outlook for growth remains favorable. Headline inflation is projected to ease further, and public debt is projected to continue moderating over the medium term. End of quote. Another report, Madam Speaker, the second one from OECD, which dates back to the 4th of December, and only 2 weeks ago, and I quote, Mauritius' economy continues to grow strongly, supported by strong momentum in tourism and investment. Tourist arrivals in 2024 are on track to surpass the record set in 2018. Cela m'amène à poser des questions, Madame la Présidente. Et je pense que pas mal de gens se posent les mêmes questions. Qui sont ceux qui ont travaillé sur les chiffres avancés dans le rapport sur l'état de l'économie? Est-ce que ce sont les mêmes personnes qui ont préparé les différents rapports sous l'ancien gouvernement? Do we know who wrote it? How was it done? And which methodology was used? In fact, Madam Speaker, I believe that the figures were revised just to show negativity and scare the population. They say that it is Statistics Mauritius who has revised these figures. The same Statistics Mauritius who quarter after quarter, and the latest one being in September, had predicted a growth of 6.5% for this year and confirmed the growth rate of 7% for last year. Are you now telling us that the same team at Statistics Mauritius have suddenly decided that the previous regime had manipulated figures and they now have decided to revise the GDP figures downwards? Or are you telling us that? Are you telling the population that this is a joke, Madam Speaker? One which we will pay dearly on the international scene. Madam Speaker, I ask that question again, who has done this State of the Economy report? We have to know. This is why I am putting that question. Was it baked by those around the Honorable Prime Minister? Those who believe that scaring the population and removing all social gains will make the Prime Minister popular? Je pense qu'il y a des questions légitimes que tout le monde, que la population est en droit de se poser. Un mois après les élections, ce gouvernement a brossé un tableau noir de l'économie de notre pays. The PM has been talking, the Prime Minister has been talking about voodoo economics. But he should remember the days when in this country we were talking about the infamous Troubinique, and some years later, l'imposition des taxes sur la classe moyenne de ce pays. Today, voodoo experts have struck again, Madam Speaker. The voodoo experts have this time deliberately downsized the contribution, and that is true, of GBCS to our economy. The figures have been almost halved. From 84.5 billion rupees, it has been reduced to 40 billion rupees. That is my question. Why that treatment to GBCS companies, Madam Speaker? And that has resulted in the estimated GDP growth for 2023 and 2024 being reduced respectively from 7% to 5.6% and 6.5% to 5.1%. Similarly, public sector debt figures have been revised upwards. This might have pleased certain egos, Madam Speaker, but the damage of the voodoo document cooked avec des mauvaises intentions will have far-reaching implications, Madam Speaker. Now, let me get back to the threshold that have been put forward in the payment of the 14-month bonus. I believe it is not fair on the part of the minister to state that the payment of the 14-month bonus necessitates further borrowing by government and that it will put Mauritius at the risk of being downgraded. As I said earlier, the revised figures by this government of the economic and public finance fundamentals have already placed Mauritius on the downgrade trail. And when I refer to the report mentioned by the minister in his speech, we are going in that direction. Therefore, do not try to put the blame on the most deserved 14-month bonus for the workers of this country. Let me say it more emphatically. Had the MSM been in power, we would have paid the 14-month bonus as promised and at one go. We would not have invented excuses as this government is doing. Madam Speaker, we as a country have successfully rebounded from the COVID pandemic and managed an economic crisis initiated by the war in Ukraine. Nous ne sommes plus au creux de la vague, Madame la Présidente. The tourism sector is thriving and foreign investment have reached record numbers. Our country, and this is a fact, has witnessed unprecedented infrastructural transformation. So much so that we will witness impact of existing but also of new projects that have been initiated during the past 2 years and over the next coming 2 years. Madam Speaker, I understand the political game. Do not make the mistake of suggesting that nothing has been done during the past 10 years. The country has taken a giant leap over the past decade. And it is the same civil servants currently working in your ministries who have made this possible. And it is thanks to their constant effort, courage, resilience that we have managed to deliver what we have delivered. You want to bring disrepute to the previous regime? Fair enough, Honorable Bhagwan. But be careful not to offend the very talented and the dedicated individuals who have given us, for example, the Saj Bridge, the Victoria Urban Terminal, the Metro Express, the sport complexes, and thousands of social housing units. Le gouvernement, Madame la Présidente, doit respecter...
Come back to the bill, please.
Yeah, I'll get back to the bill, Madam Speaker. Le gouvernement doit respecter ses engagements pris auprès de ce peuple. And I'm not talking only about the 14-month, Madam Speaker. Now, as leader of the opposition, I have the responsibility to raise questions in this House. And I will do so, Madame Speaker. Autant de questions qu'il faut, parce que la population, Madame la Présidente, veut avoir des réponses. It is indeed, Madam Speaker, my first intervention in this House as leader of the opposition. I'm being very fair. I understand, Madam Speaker, that it is a new government with many newcomers, but also seasoned politicians sitting on the other side of the House and running a ministry for the first time. And like I said, il y aura une période de grâce. Et je vais respecter cela, Madame la Présidente. But come the next parliamentary session next year, this will not be the case. Je vais conclure, Madame la Présidente. Nous avons, Madame la Présidente, je vais terminer, nous avons un nouveau gouvernement qui, à travers son manifeste électoral, a présenté ses intentions. Mais il y aura sûrement un programme gouvernemental. Certes, ce qui est vrai, vous avez gagné avec une large majorité qui vous permet d'apporter des changements au niveau constitutionnel et institutionnel. J'espère qu'il n'y aura pas d'abus. Malheureusement, les premiers pas de ce gouvernement sont inquiétants pour la population. Une promesse que j'ai qualifiée un peu plus tôt de demi-teinte. Le peuple ne mérite pas une politique économique d'austérité comme cela avait été le cas entre 2005 et 2010. J'en ai terminé, Madame la Présidente.
Merci. Yes.
Madam Speaker, usually the member who speaks after the leader of the opposition spends the first part of his or her speech replying to the leader of the opposition. There's nothing to reply to. I've listened. I've listened to what the leader of the opposition, and we respect him. We were all present when he put his PNQ, when he made his speech, if we can call that a speech. But we're all present. There's nothing to reply to. There are two of them, and the leader of the opposition speaks on such an important bill, and the second one is not even present. Do I need to speak? In itself, this speaks for everything. So, good one. And I'll take just one example. He stands up and says, if an employer doesn't respect the law, 5,000 rupees only, it is not even aware. That is 5,000 rupees for every worker. It's 5,000 rupees for every time that the law is not abided to. Even that he hasn't managed to understand. So I will not waste more time. With due respect to the leader of the opposition, without honesty. There are two of them, and already one has vanished. Enfin, let me get to more serious things. It's true that we have to talk about the package. The bill is about le 14e mois. But we are all aware that we have to talk about the package. 14e mois, compensation salariale, les salariés, la baisse du prix de l'essence et du diesel. We have to do that because we've had a look at what they left behind and we've taken the best decision that we could take to preserve the future of this country. Therefore, let us rapidly look at this package, Madam Speaker. I want to come back to what was said last week, recently, in the state of the economy. It speaks for itself. But what we are discovering is worse than what is in the state of the economy. I'll take just one example, and there will be dozens of examples like this. Le métro, Métro Express, la grande fierté. Allow me to illustrate that what we are finding out is worse than what is in the state of the economy. Métro Express, as at date, they have 17 billion rupees de debt. 17 milliards. Ils ont perdu en 5 ans, en termes de foreign exchange loss, 3 milliards de rupees. We all know what you spend in a business, in an operation, you must earn. Madam Speaker, the operating expenses, catastrophe. The annual deficit is about 300 million rupees. Operating expenses, 300 millions de pertes chaque année. Et c'est pas fini. We all know that trams, they don't last forever. In the near future, we'll have to start replacing. It's been calculated that major overhaul costs for the light rate vehicles are to be incurred in financial years 2026, 2027, and so on. With the inclusion of the overall and final cost, Metro Express would face an average deficit of some 2 milliards, 2 billion yearly for the next 10 years. That's just one example. Metro Express to break even. It would require its fares to be increased up to 213 rupees as compared to the current maximum fare of 55 rupees. These are real facts and figures. What we are discovering, c'est pire que ce qui est dans le state of the economy. It's all over the place like that. You talk about the CB, name it. State Trading Corporation, name it. And Mauritius worse than everything. Worse even than Metro. The billions and billions which they took from the Bank of Mauritius through MIC. 24 milliards, if I'm not mistaken. 24 milliards! Dilapidated. So I don't want to spend too much time, but it's all over the place, the mess. Let me tell, moi, que le peuple comprenne bien, we have done the maximum. And according to the IMF, to the World Bank, to the private sector, we should not have given what is in this bill, in the package. Je demande à la population, aux salariés, aux travailleurs, aux cadres, de bien comprendre. Nous avons fait le maximum. Maintenant, quand on regarde les rapports, etc., il est clair que Moody's se préparait à nous downgrade. Et la menace est là. Je n'ai pas besoin de rappeler à la population que Moody's nous avait downgraded le 28 juillet 2022. Ça nous pend au nez économique. Un downgrading. Bon, on a fait le maximum. Mon collègue, le ministre du Travail, faisait référence à un communiqué de Moody's datant de quelques heures à peine, tout récent. Allons bien réaliser que c'était flatteur pour le gouvernement. Oui, mais c'est parce qu'on a dit notre intention d'aller dans une direction. On n'a pas le choix. Il faut réduire la dette. Il faut redresser le budget. On n'a pas le choix. Donc, le Premier ministre est venu avec des chiffres. We mean to do what we said. Mais ce communiqué de Moody's est venu juste avant qu'on vienne avec ce package. Juste avant, là, ils sont sûrement en train de refaire tous les calculs, etc. Et ils doivent quoi qu'on les a couillonnés? On ne les a pas couillonnés comme on dit en bon mauricien. Non! On a considéré que c'était le minimum qui est en même temps le maximum que nous pouvions faire. Mais seulement, il y a des mesures qui ont été annoncées dans le State of the Economy, que nous avons répétées quand nous avons offert ce package. Il faut redresser l'économie. Et il n'y a pas 1000 façons de faire ça. S'attaquer à la dette publique, s'attaquer au déficit budgétaire, mais il n'y a même plus de déficit budgétaire. Il y a des zones budgétaires totales. En vérité, il n'y a plus de budget. Il y a des fonds spéciaux partout. Il y a une banque centrale qui n'était plus une banque centrale, qui était devenue une planche à billets. Nous n'avons pas le choix. Et franchement, quand on regarde cette menace de downgrading, mais même si le downgrade, si Moody's nous dégrade, il faut regarder au-delà, parce que le mess qu'ils ont laissé derrière eux, ça ne va pas prendre un mois pour redresser ça. Ça demande 1 an, 2 ans, 3 ans, 4 ans, 5 ans. We mean it and we'll do it. Madame Speaker. It's going to be difficult. Il y a des mesures qu'il nous faudra prendre très vite. Par exemple, le MIC, le Mauritius Investment Corporation. Vraiment, je ne parle pas à la légère. Ils ont commis, le Premier ministre d'avant, son père n'aurait jamais commis des crimes comme ça. J'ai connu son père pendant des années. On n'était pas d'accord sur beaucoup de choses. Mais des crimes comme les crimes que Pravin Jagnat et son complice Padayachi ont commis, son père n'aurait jamais commis de tels crimes. Voilà la situation dans laquelle on est. On aura des décisions difficiles à prendre. Et à quoi nous pensons, nous? À l'avenir, aux enfants de ce pays-là, aux petits-enfants. Arrête de badiner avec tout un pays. We mean what we say, we're going to do it. Mais nous allons continuer. Comme l'a dit mon ami Ashok Soubon, le Premier ministre, les autres, nous allons continuer de faire le maximum que nous pouvons. C'est pourquoi on a été obligé de limiter le paiement du 14e mois aux salariés qui touchent moins que 50 000. Il n'y a pas d'argent, ils ont défoncé la caisse. Ils n'ont pas défoncé la caisse, ils ont volé la caisse pour pas dire avec lui. Enfin, il y a des moments difficiles devant nous. Et je vois probablement genuinely wrong venir dire que les fonctionnaires n'auront pas de 14e mois. Mon collègue a bien expliqué Je préfère croire que c'est de l'ignorance. Je ne suis pas sûr. Je ne suis pas sûr. Mais disons, allons faire semblant de croire que c'est de l'ignorance qui fait dire une chose pareille. C'est terrible. Certaines mesures, ce n'est pas nous qui avons à les prendre, s'il faut les prendre, comme une augmentation des interest rates, des taux d'intérêt de la Banque centrale. On a rendu son indépendance à la Banque centrale, on a mis quelqu'un, on peut ne pas être d'accord avec lui, mais personne ne met en question la compétence professionnelle. Ben, nous laissons la nouvelle Banque de Maurice prendre les décisions qu'il faut en ce qui concerne les taux d'intérêt. Nous allons nous concentrer sur deux choses, surtout, comme je le répète, diminuer la dette publique, une pression terrible, et redresser le budget de l'État. Ils ont tout ruiné. Ces décisions-là, nous allons les prendre, mais tout en continuant à faire le maximum. Et c'est pourquoi, en ce qui concerne les pensionnés, les handicapés, les allowances, les carers allowance, tout ça, ils auront tout ce qu'on a promis, parce qu'on peut tenir cette promesse-là. Mais on ne va pas tenir une promesse au prix de l'avenir de ce pays. Heureusement, je dis franc, heureusement qu'il y a le Premier ministre que nous avons et qu'on est en parfait accord sur ce qu'on peut faire, sur ce qu'on ne peut pas faire, et qu'il faut regarder l'horizon, pas seulement notre poche, mais regarder l'horizon. Nous allons le faire, nous allons réussir. Ce ne sera pas facile, mais nous allons réussir. Et c'est pourquoi j'ai dit, j'allais oublier de dire, et nous avions pris la décision de donner l'exemple. We had decided before the law came, we had decided that pour donner l'exemple, les députés, les ministres qui étaient dans ce Parlement l'année dernière ne prendraient pas de 14e mois. Maintenant, la loi a limité à 50 000. Mais avant cela, nous avions pris la décision de donner l'exemple que les députés et ministres ne prendraient pas le 14e mois si le 14e mois était à leur portée, à leur disposition. Parce que nous avons la ferme intention de donner l'exemple aussi. Partout où nous pourrons donner l'exemple. La situation est tellement grave que j'ai dit, nous aurons à compter sur nos alliés, nos amis, les pays alliés, les pays amis, les pays étrangers. Nous aurons à compter sur eux. À commencer par l'Inde, la Grande-Bretagne et les États-Unis, la Chine, n'en déplaise à certains, tous les pays amis. Nous comptons sur eux, mais seulement we must earn what we'll get from them. They look at the horizon their way, but they look at the horizon also. Et nous allons voir quoi faire vis-à-vis de la Banque mondiale et du FMI. Je dis toujours à mes amis, ces derniers temps, prenez le temps d'étudier ce qui s'est passé et ce qui se passe au Sri Lanka et aux îles Maldives. A lot of lessons to be learned by that, Madame Speaker. C'est que le gouvernement d'avant ne vienne pas il se tourne vers la banque. Je vous rappelle que le gouvernement précédent avait conclu, ou plutôt cherché un accord avec la Banque mondiale. Dans le budget 2023-2024, était prévu dans le budget 250 millions de la Banque mondiale. Mais ça aussi, ils n'ont pas été foutus de faire. Ils n'ont même pas réussi à négocier ce qu'ils avaient annoncé dans le budget. 250 millions disparus. Nous aurons à faire des efforts et nous comptons sur la Banque mondiale, le FMI, pas à n'importe quelle condition. C'est un peu la même chose que dans le cas de Diego Garcia et des Chagos. La Grande-Bretagne a finalement été obligée de reconnaître notre souveraineté. La souveraineté que nous avons depuis 1965, depuis 1968. Et ils ont fait une ticasse. Enfin, un peu une grosse ticasse. Une ticasse. Quoi, parce qu'on est en difficulté, on va sauter dessus. Maintenant qu'ils ont reconnu notre souveraineté, nous trouverons d'autres moyens si les négociations n'aboutissent pas, parce que les négociations sont toujours en cours. Et nous avons besoin de cet argent pour sortir de l'économique mess dans lequel le gouvernement précédent nous a mis, mais pas à n'importe quel prix, pas à n'importe quelle condition. Nous sommes lucides, Madame la Présidente, nous sommes parfaitement lucides. Et nous ferons notre devoir, arrive qu'arrive. Je terminerai en revenant sur quelque chose que nous avons adopté, que nous avons mis dans notre programme, un Fiscal Responsibility Act. S'il y avait un bon fiscal, qu'est-ce que c'est qu'un Fiscal Responsibility Act? C'est une loi qui fixe les taux d'endettement du pays, de déficit budgétaire, etc., qui exige une responsabilité du gouvernement. Des Fiscal Responsibility Act existent de par le monde seulement, le plus souvent. Les pays où existe la Fiscal Responsibility ne respectent même pas la loi, leur propre loi. Pas tous les pays, mais beaucoup de pays. C'est pourquoi certains pays comme la Jamaïque, j'invite mes collègues à étudier ce qui se passe en Jamaïque. Pas seulement aujourd'hui, depuis 4 ans. It's cooking en Jamaïque. Et la Jamaïque est parmi les premiers pays qui ont un fiscal responsibility, mais qui veulent aussi un mécanisme pour faire respecter ce fiscal responsibility. C'est pourquoi ils ont voté et ils sont en train de mettre debout un independent, vraiment independent, pas comme l'ICAC d'ici, l'ancien ICAC d'ici, heureusement, mais un Independent Fiscal Commission, des gens indépendants, qualifiés, avec un board, avec un directeur général, avec un advisory board, pour faire respecter le Fiscal Responsibility Act que le pays a adopté. Nous sommes sérieux, nous regardons loin, nous regardons l'horizon. Le Premier ministre et moi, et les autres, nous ne voulons pas que ce crime économique qui a été commis ces dernières 5 années se répète. Il faut à tout prix éviter ça, et le prix, c'est un bon Fiscal Responsibility Act et un bon mécanisme pour le faire respecter, un Independent Fiscal Commission. 1 mois dans l'histoire d'un pays, c'est peu. Mais nous sommes fiers de ce que nous sommes en train de faire depuis 1 mois. Et je demande aux travailleurs, je demande aux syndicats, je demande aux cadres, aux professionnels de bien comprendre de quelle situation de faillite nous avons hérité. Que nous ne pouvons pas faire plus que ce que nous avons fait avec ce package. Non, franchement, j'ai été syndicaliste, je suis politicien depuis 40 ans. Alors, si on pouvait, et tout le monde sait que je suis quelqu'un de responsable avant tout. Quand je donne une parole, je tiens ma parole, à moins que ce soit impossible de tenir la parole. C'est le cas là. Nous avons dit que nous allions donner un 14e mois, nous avons donné, mais pas le full 14e mois que nous aurions aimé donner. Mais Je demande à la population, aux cadres, aux salariés de bien comprendre. Nous avons fait et nous continuerons à faire le maximum pour les plus vulnérables, pour les pensionnés, les vieux, pour les salariés au bas de l'échelle, pour les victimes de la misère en général et pour les autres aussi dans toute la mesure du possible, les professionnels, les cadres. Mais notre phare à nous, et je terminerai là-dessus, notre phare à nous, c'est l'avenir de notre pays. Ni le Premier ministre, ni moi, nous ne ferons rien qui, comme eux, ils ont fait, tuera l'avenir de ce pays. Depuis un mois, nous travaillons nuit et jour à cela. Peut-être la population ne se rend pas compte. Ce mois qui vient de passer, la pression qu'il y a eu sur le Premier ministre, sur moi-même, la pression du travail, quand on a deux dossiers, comme ce dossier-ci, et le dossier Chagos, Diego, ben, ça ne nous a pas empêché de nous occuper des autres problèmes. Je prends un exemple. J'ai passé je ne sais pas combien d'heures à discuter avec les gens concernés, à commencer par Sam Lotan, la drogue, les ravages. Il faut travailler là-dessus aussi. Donc, depuis un mois, nous travaillons non seulement à redresser, à sauver, à redresser cette économie, à faire face aux Britanniques sur le dossier Chagos et Dromlin, mais déjà chaque ministre a son poste. Et je salue les nouveaux ministres. Je salue en particulier mon camarade Ashok. La façon qu'ils ont appris ce rôle de ministre avec responsabilité, mais avec courage aussi. Depuis un mois, nous travaillons d'arrache-pied. Nous allons continuer. Je demande à la population de bien comprendre que nous ne pouvions pas faire plus que ce que nous avons fait. Allons construire l'avenir ensemble. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Honorable Parapen.
Madam Speaker, it is with great humility and a deep sense of responsibility that I address this esteemed assembly for the first time. Today marks my maiden speech as a Member of Parliament, and I am honored to have the privilege of representing the people of constituency number 1, Grand River Northwest and Portland West in this August Assembly. I rise today to speak on the second reading of a special allowance bill. While the general elections held on the 10th of November 2024 may be behind us, the commitments taken during the electoral campaign are still very much alive. It is worth remembering that the promise of a payment of a 14th month did not feature in the electoral manifesto of Alliance du Changement when it was presented to the public on Tuesday, the 29th October 2024. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, the promise of a 14th month bonus did not feature in the electoral manifesto of any of the prominent political parties or alliances which took part at these elections. So must we not ask ourselves, how did this measure of a 14th month bonus make its way into Parliament? The Honourable Leader of Opposition, in his speech, alluded to the announcement of a 14th month bonus by the then Alliance Les Peuples as being a decision taken to address the loss of purchasing power of the population. The Honourable Leader of Opposition has either lost his memory or is deliberately misleading the House. Madam Speaker, desperate people do desperate things. And in the face of a crushing electoral defeat, the then Prime Minister Jugnauth notoriously announced the payment of a 14th month bonus if he were re-elected during the last political rally of his party on the 3rd of December 2024, exactly a week before the elections were due to take place. At no point in time did he or any of the representatives from his Alliance des Peuples explain the rationale behind the payment of the 14th month, nor the way such an onerous electoral promise would be financed. As we said, Madam Speaker, desperate people do desperate things. Madam Speaker, it is well known that in order to neutralize a political opponent, one of the most effective strategies is to mirror the action of your opponent. In the United States, after losing several presidential elections in a row, the Democratic Party under Bill Clinton adopted some traditionally Republican positions, like advocating for welfare reform and a balanced budget. This strategy turned out to be effective and helped Bill Clinton secure 2 consecutive terms as the President of the United States of America. Tony Blair adopted a similar approach a few years later in the United Kingdom by launching his new Labour movement to woo Tories voters. This helped Blair secure 3 consecutive electoral successes. Madam Speaker, in our local context, unfortunately, populism is now deeply ingrained within our political tradition. The politics of mid-for gain for has been on the ascendancy for many years now, and no political party has epitomized this more than the previous government led by the Mouvement Socialiste Militant of Pravin Jugnauth. The last-ditch attempt to salvage his sinking government by promising a 14th month salary will go down in history as the pinnacle of populism in Mauritian politics. Madam Speaker, the sheer structure of our society means that populist measures can have a significant impact on voting patterns. And truth be told, numerous elections in the not so distant past have been won or lost on the basis of populist measures being announced or not announced. However unfortunate, this is the reality of the situation, and we cannot and should not hide away from it. Madam Speaker, neutralizing a political opponent which indulges into populism in the Republic of Mauritius is no mean feat. Past experience has taught us that the only effective strategy is to mirror its policies, however irresponsible they might be. Madam Speaker, one could argue that it was not necessary for the Alliance du Changement to include the 14th month bonus in its electoral manifesto, that the Alliance would have won a landslide victory irrespective of this one-off 14th month salary payment. And they would probably be right, Madam Speaker. But the question I would like to put to all those who share this premise is very simple. Aren't we all wise after the event? Madam Speaker, my party, Résistance et Alternative, agreed to join forces with the Labour Party, the Mouvement Militant Mauricien, and the Nouveau Démocrate on programmatic and pragmatic grounds, because, in our opinion, our beloved country was on the brink of entering a fully fledged dictatorship. At the last general elections, we were adamant that we could not take any chances with respect to the outcome of the elections. Pravin Jagnnath and his government had to be ousted. Madam Speaker, the decision of the Alliance du Changement to align itself with Jagannath's trump card of a 14th month salary should also be interpreted in the same vein. That is, to do what we must do to ensure that our country is liberated from the grasp of a regime that has been responsible for so much suffering and anguish among the population. So it is in this context that the Special Allowance Bill which is being debated in this House today must be taken. It is a profound desire of this government to honor the commitments announced during the electoral campaign. And I have no doubt that this government would have honored its commitment to pay a full 14th month salary bonus to all employees had the financial situation of the economy been healthy. But one cannot make abstraction of a dire economic predicament the country finds itself in. In his State of the Economy address on the Tuesday, the 10th of December 2024, the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance painted a very gloomy picture of our economy. As an economist and the economic spokesperson for Resistance et Alternative over the last 10 years or so now, I was more than convinced that the previous government was cooking the books and hiding the real true economic situation from the population. But I must confess that I was appalled by what was revealed in this very House about the state of the Mauritian economy. The term politique de terre brûlée is very much appropriate in light of the destructive policies implemented by the former government. In light of a report on the state of the economy, it would have been hugely inappropriate for this government to proceed with a blanket 14th month bonus. Not only would it have severely impacted our level of public indebtedness, but it would have sent the wrong signal to the outside world. A country's sovereign rating can be likened to an individual's reputation. Once one gains a bad reputation, it can take years or even decades to make up for it. Rating agencies like Moody's rank countries across the world and typically distinguish them between two categories: investment grade and non-investment grade. As stated by the Honourable Minister of Labour, Honourable Hutim, those countries with a non-investment grade status are also known as junk-rated countries, and they typically face harsher financing conditions. Mauritius managed to attain an investment grade status over the years owing to its cumulative economic progress and manageable public debt levels. However, after 10 years under the stewardship of Pravin Jagnnath, the country is on the brink of losing its investment grade status and being moved into junk category. The threat is very much real. Such a downgrade would spell trouble for our economy, especially for some important segments of our financial sector. Madam Speaker, the decision not to award a 14th month bonus to those earning more than 50,000 rupees per month has nothing to do with supposed pressure from employers, as alluded by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. If the previous government had not ransacked the coffers of government, a blanket 14th month bonus would have been paid to all. As a responsible government, we must do everything we can to convince international rating agencies that we are still worth an investment grade rating. This will not be an easy task, but it starts with a special allowance bill today. With respect to devising the right criteria upon which someone would be eligible and someone would not be eligible, there can never be a perfect formula. Each formula will come with pros and cons. The eligibility criteria decided by this government has been a means-tested one. As such, 90% of the working population earning the lowest basic salaries will be eligible to a 14th-month bonus. Yes, Madam Speaker, 9 out of 10 Mauritians who is recognized as an employee under the laws of a republic will be receiving a 14th-month salary. And this is a highly commendable effort by the government, given the difficult financial situation the country finds itself in. That said, I feel it is also important to take note that inflation has been so rampant in recent years in Mauritius that there has been a generalized impoverishment of all households across all social classes. As such, several citizens who find themselves in the bracket of salaries not eligible for the special allowance feel that they have been unjustly excluded and that they too deserve some sort of gratification. The government should not turn a deaf ear to these individuals and should give due consideration to their grievances when crafting future economic policies. The middle class is the backbone of any thriving economy, and it is a fact that the middle class of our society has suffered the most over the last 10 years compared to other social strata. Madam Speaker, it is also worth mentioning the one-off nature of this special allowance given to employees, to eligible employees. In no way should this bill be considered as an integral part of the economic policy framework of this new government. Its non-recurrence means that its impact on the economy and society will be short-lived. All stakeholders must take good note of this, including the beneficiaries themselves, the non-beneficiaries, as well as the private sector. It is also highly appreciable that the special allowance has been broken down in 2 tranches, one payable in December 2024 and another one in January 2025. This will allow the mass of money to flow into different sectors of the economy and provide a broad-based economic impetus. The self-employed community, though not a direct beneficiary of the 14th-month bonus, stands to gain indirectly from this measure, as their business activities will likely flourish on account of increased consumption. As such, consumers should be encouraged to support the local economy as far as possible. To conclude, Madam Speaker, the economic and financial legacy of the previous government is well and truly catastrophic, and it will take a lot of discipline and hard work to put the country back on the rails of progress and prosperity. Given the precarious situation the country found itself in, it could have been justified to walk away from the promise of the 14th-month bonus. But the special allowance bill shows the commitment of its newly elected government to make good on its electoral promises, in spite of the challenging economic circumstances. Madam Speaker, this government has been given a clear mandate to improve the economic situation of the population. And while the 14th-month bonus will certainly alleviate the financial constraints of households over coming months, it would certainly not prove to be a long-term solution. It is high time that we move from the illusion of progress to the reality of progress. As such, the true barometer of economic progress will be the forthcoming structural and fundamental economic reforms which will be put forward by the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance in the next budget. I thank you and all Honorable MPs for their time and attention.
Thank you. Honorable Etwaria.
Madame la Présidente, les résultats des récentes élections ont rendu la liberté à toute la population, on l'a vu partout dans le pays. Les mesures spéciales annoncées par le gouvernement, plus particulièrement l'annonce du 14e mois dont on débat aujourd'hui, et les autres mesures, notamment la baisse du prix de l'essence par exemple, vont rendre le sourire au pays. Ce pays avait arrêté de sourire depuis un moment et on avait besoin de cela. Donc, avec la liberté retrouvée et le sourire revenu, on ne peut que penser du bien de ce qui est en train de se passer. Madame la Présidente, l'objectif de mon intervention aujourd'hui est de saluer le projet présenté par l'honorable ministre du Travail et à travers lui tout le gouvernement qui fait tout ce qui est possible, comme a dit le Premier ministre, dans les circonstances économiques données. Le déboursement du 14e mois viendra soulager la plus grande partie des salariés ainsi que tous les bénéficiaires d'allocations sociales diverses. Le versement renforcera leur pouvoir d'achat qui n'a cessé de dégringoler au fil des années. On connaît les raisons à cause des augmentations des prix de production ainsi que par la dévaluation constante et voulue de notre roupie par le pouvoir sortant. On sait que la roupie a perdu 46% de sa valeur par rapport au dollar sur les 10 dernières années. Le gouvernement sortant a trompé toute la population tout le long de ces 10 dernières années en créant une illusion des richesses, le tout reposant sur la manipulation de comptes. On en a parlé ce matin au moment des questions. Le pillage de fonds publics, on en a aussi parlé à l'heure des questions. Et un endettement vertigineux qui met l'avenir en risque. Un endettement qui dépasse aujourd'hui les 80% sur notre produit intérieur brut. Le Special Allowance Bill restaurera tant soit peu le pouvoir d'achat et améliorera la qualité des vies de nos compatriotes, certes. Mais elle aura aussi un autre impact non négligeable, psychologique, certes. L'annonce de cette décision, et c'était une promesse gouvernementale de l'Alliance pour les changements, va rendre le sourire aux Mauriciens, et je vais vous dire, je vais faire un état de lieu de ce qui avait repris notre sourire. Madame la Présidente, au fait, notre pays est plongé dans le malheur ces dernières années. Selon l'édition 2024 du Happiness Index Report, réalisé par Gallup, les Nations Unies et l'Université d'Oxford, et qui mesure le bien-être, un rapport dévoilé le 20 mars dernier, nous avons dégringolé de la 52e à la 70e place en une année. Au hit parade de ces classements, nous nous retrouvons pratiquement au milieu de ces classements qui répertorient les niveaux de bonheur des 143 pays. Nous ne sommes pas en si bonne compagnie. Au 69e rang, on retrouve la République dominicaine, et je n'ai aucun mépris pour ce pays. Et à la 61e place, la Moldavie, juste avant la Russie. Donc nous sommes à la 70e place. En 2021, donc 3 ans plus tôt, l'île Maurice occupait le 50e rang. Donc le recul est formidable, une façon de le dire. Le recul en termes de bien-être se constate aussi dans les rapports sur le développement humain publiés chaque année pour le programme des Nations Unies pour le développement, le PNUD comme nous le connaissons. L'édition 2024 classe Maurice au 72e rang sur 193 pays en 2018, nous occupions la 65e place sur 189 pays. L'indice de développement humain tient compte non seulement du revenu, mais aussi des indicateurs comme l'espérance de vie, de l'accès à l'éducation, à la santé, mais aussi des respects des libertés fondamentales dans le pays. Des respects des libertés, parlons-en, Madame la Présidente. C'est les reculs, en fait. Les rapports 2024 de l'Institut VDEM, lié au département des sciences politiques de l'Université de Göteborg en Suède, placent Maurice dans le top 10 des États en voie d'autocratisation. L'Institut VDEM n'invente rien. La démocratie à Maurice au niveau des administrations régionales avec les élections renvoyées à plusieurs reprises. La démocratie parlementaire, les collègues ici en savent quelque chose. La liberté d'expression par le muselage de la presse sont des tristes réalités. Ce déclin dont je vous parle et qui nous avait repris le sourire a débuté en 2018, excusez-moi, a noté l'Institut VDEM. Puis, pour notre bonheur, un changement de paradigme s'est opéré le fameux 10 novembre. Un jour après les résultats des élections ont confirmé que la population souffrait en silence et dans la peur ces dernières années. Tout le monde a parlé des libertés retrouvées et des nouveaux espoirs. Tout le monde a constaté, tout le monde retrouve aujourd'hui le sourire avec la perspective de toucher le 14e mois et l'augmentation du pouvoir d'achat, la possibilité d'améliorer les conditions de vie. Madame la Présidente, l'allocation du 14e mois par le gouvernement de l'Alliance pour les changements traduit une promesse en termes de pouvoir d'achat. Il y a certes une polémique autour du plafond des 50 000 roupies, on en a parlé. Ne nous voilons pas la face. Ce n'est pas le gouvernement actuel qui l'impose, mais c'est bien l'état des finances publiques qui n'accorde pas des marges de manœuvre et qui dicte ce plafond. Monsieur le leader de l'opposition qui a tant parlé tout à l'heure est parti et j'ai remarqué qu'il fait ça souvent, le moment où il doit écouter ses pairs. Très souvent, il n'est pas là. Tout à l'heure, on a vu aussi que le Chief Whip, l'autre député, n'est pas là depuis le début. Donc, ce sont des gens qui ne veulent pas voir la vérité. Nous héritons d'une économie saccagée sauvagement par un gouvernement sortant irresponsable et pas du tout soucieux de l'avenir de nos enfants. Comme cadeau de départ, l'ancien régime nous laisse aux jeunes une dette de 500 000 roupies dès sa naissance. Il est évident que chaque pas de ce nouveau gouvernement est surveillé de près par les agences de notation. Moody's nous a à l'œil et les risques de downgrade sont réels. Madame la Speaker, nous connaissons tous les conséquences d'une baisse de notation sont très fâcheuses. Le taux de rendement sur les obligations à 10 ans, qui est des références, vont grimper s'il y a un downgrade. Et ça veut dire que le pays devra payer un taux d'intérêt encore plus élevé pour emprunter sur le marché. Ce taux d'intérêt sur les obligations de 10 ans ont déjà atteint les 4,9% en décembre 2018. Alors, je vous laisse imaginer si, en cas de downgrade, ce taux va augmenter jusqu'à 6-7%. Nous nous souvenons tous de ce qui s'est produit avec la Grèce, quand la Grèce n'avait pas réussi à rembourser sa dette. C'était en 2013-14 et qui avait plongé toute l'Union européenne dans une récession. Cela dit, Madame la Présidente, il est clair que Moody's nous a à l'œil et nous sommes suspendus à ce que Moody's va nous dire. Mais un jour, il faudra aussi se poser la question, c'est qui est Moody's? Nous sommes malheureusement pris dans une logique où ces organisations à but lucratif ont un si grand pouvoir sur la marche de notre économie et d'autres économies des pays en voie de développement. Un jour, effectivement, il faudra poser la question de savoir qui va noter les agences de notation. Il faudra la poser en alliance avec d'autres pays et mettre en question leur puissance. Mais ce n'est pas ici une plateforme aujourd'hui de le faire. Madame la Présidente, il est évident que l'ancien régime a pratiqué la politique. Je vais reprendre cette phrase parce que mon collègue tout à l'heure, il a parlé de la politique des terres brûlées. Merci. Ouais. Il y a une autre expression qui a été utilisée à maintes reprises, après moi et déluge, qui a été utilisée à plusieurs reprises. Cette fameuse expression est prêtée à Louis XV, qui voulait faire savoir à ses partisans qu'il s'est moqué complètement de ce que pourrait faire son dauphin Louis XVI, et a été repris par la suite, mais plus récemment dans l'histoire contemporaine par le triste maréchal Mobutu Sese Seko, qui à l'époque était le président de la République du Zaïre, à présent la République de Congo. Fervent admirateur de Machiavel, après 32 ans de règne brutal et une fuite honteuse de son pays en 1997, il avait effectivement laissé un pays en ruine, comme vient de le faire le gouvernement sortant. Sans faire de comparaison avec les Zaïre de l'époque et Mobutu Sese Seko, le Premier ministre sortant et sa bande organisée des pilleurs nous ont laissé nos finances publiques en lambeaux. Et cela nous mènera peut-être au Fonds monétaire international. Je n'aime pas cette perspective. Je sais que la discipline fiscale et budgétaire s'impose, et c'est cela qui va plaire à nos bailleurs de fonds, y compris nos pays amis. Madame la Présidente, le gouvernement a fait le choix difficile de demander aux hauts salaires de faire un sacrifice. C'est le prix à payer pour sortir de l'ornière, pour éviter un downgrade de la fameuse note de Moody's. Et in fine, pour accéder auprès du FMI. Espérons que si nous allons au FMI, les conditions des emprunts seront les plus avantageuses pour nous, mais nous savons qu'une fois on entre au FMI, ça devient très très difficile d'en sortir. Pour la suite, Madame la Présidente, nous attendons la publication du programme gouvernemental qui donnera les orientations de la politique économique et financière pour ces prochaines années. Et là, nous le verrons, nous le commenterons en place et lieu. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I should have said to Mr. Parapen as well as you, I think they were both doing maiden speeches, which I think is a very sexist term. I'm joking. But you will surely get other possibilities, as you just mentioned, l'indice du bonheur, tout ça. Même ça, il faut se poser des questions. Alors, on va peut-être, sur ces indices-là, se lever et peut-être aller se détendre un peu. 1h30, 1.5 hours for dinner. I would have said 1 hour, but maybe un petit peu plus d'1 heure, on va dire. On coupe la poire en deux. 1 hour, 15 minutes.